Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3. I am your host, Sean, and with me tonight is Dave Bauer, Devin Snader, and Ryan Bizzarro.
Got the whole gang here today.
We do. So let's start with topic number 1 today. Since we last talked, we knew Larry Courville was leaving the organization, but we didn't know how fast, right? So it's been announced since we last talked that Larry has been fired. So we kind of want to talk about that and kind of relive some of our likes and dislikes of Larry and the system that he ran here. So first, let's lead off talking about how the news came about, right? So earlier in the year, it was announced that he, could not come to a contract agreement, and the decision was made that he would be leaving the team at the end of the year. The team then clinched the playoffs as the season progressed. Ironically, I believe, one day?
The next day.
Literally the next day after we clinched, he was let go and was fired. And we want to preface that by saying he was fired.
Well, the team never said it was fired, but to anybody with a brain, it's fired.
Yeah, and, the Reading Eagle announced it was a firing. It wasn't a mutual parting or anything like that. We've seen Drew Bell at games, and I know at the last, or I guess it was the first playoff game or second playoff game, Larry was in attendance, so,
It was the second one.
Was it the second one?
Because I remember, they ended up losing the game. People were saying it was all because Larry was there, and I think I saw my eyes rolled back that far.
Yeah, so it was pretty crazy, so we kind of want to talk about that most of today's episode, and also kind of give some of the, I would say, pretty funny social media reactions that we've been reading. So we're not going to be naming any names, but, you guys know the sites and all that, so you can kind of guess who said what. So, Ryan, any favorite quotes you want to talk about tonight that made you laugh?
Well, the first one I see is from somebody that said, "Wow, complete bullshit."
You got to love that reaction, right?
Yeah.
So that was sort of my reaction in the beginning. Here's a guy that was third of all time in the ECHL in total wins.
Second, I think.
Second. So easily top 5. I know he's definitely in the top 5, but to let somebody go like that, the way we let him go, especially considering that we have a part-time owner now, there's no such thing as 2 full-time jobs. You can't do both jobs full-time. I've tried. It's not a possibility. You can't split yourself in 2 and be in Allen, Texas, and be in Reading, Pennsylvania. So I think that's very important as we're sitting here tonight as fans talking about, here's a guy, we knew Larry was leaving, right? There's lots of rumors going around that, he was working another job while still, coaching the team. And if that's the case, then yeah, I can understand it. And that's really as far as I'd like to take that subject tonight with rumors and all of that. But keep in mind, the owner is doing the exact same thing here.
It's very hypocritical, if you ask me.
It is. And I know there's been a lot of reaction, not only in Reading, with a lot of unhappiness here with the fan base, but we're also starting to see some of that in the ECHL pages too, on social media, where the fans don't seem to be as happy as I think he thought he would be. One of the big topics I know is they're changing the city from Allen to, I believe it was voted in Dallas.
Yeah, I think
Dallas. Are they keeping the Americans' name?
I believe they're
so.
keeping that.
Yeah, I think they're keeping the Allen name too, because there was a thing I saw, I think it was like a week ago, where Galati actually went on to their, I think it was their YouTube page, and they released it onto their Facebook saying that, it will be still the Allen Americans because of the uproar he was getting. And I think the funny thing about it was, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but it was let go on the one ECHL Bashboards page by an Allen fan that when they were searching through some pages or wherever they were websites they were on, that it's actually I guess the ECHL is a publicly, all their paperwork comes out to the public eventually at some point. Well, here people filed for the Allen name to be changed already. They already had a name in mind before they even voted on it.
Interesting.
So that's what started the whole uproar in Allen, I guess, was something along those lines.
Yeah, and for me, if I'm an Allen fan and I'm hearing that, I'm sitting there going, what are we doing? You know what I mean? I mean, I can understand, hey, you're trying to attract a new fan base and all of that, but, dude, you just got here. That kind of reaction. I know when Jack first came here, we were all very excited. We had the bobblehead, Are You Happy? I think a lot of us nowadays kind of look back at that and kind of laugh. But by no means is this a bash, Jack, because I know Jack's done a lot for this for the organization, has done a ton for the city. So please don't confuse the two. We're kind of just sitting here pointing out what's ironic about the situation. You know, a part-time head coach, part-time owner. Like I said, there's no such thing as two full-time jobs. You cannot pull it off. You can be an entrepreneur. You can consider yourself that as your full-time job, but to be two full-time jobs, I just laugh at when I hear that. So going back to Larry, let's talk about some of our favorites and like our likes about what Larry did here, and then also a lot of our dislikes. So on social media, the reason why I want to bring this up is there seems to be a divide in the fan base, and I feel like the middleman fans really aren't getting their voice heard. Me being one of those middle of the road type of fans. For me, what I liked and why I thought Larry should have stayed the whole year was simply he's one of the top 5 winning coaches in the ECHL. By every means has he earned the right to finish out this year.
Well, especially think of it. He's coached 8 seasons
Right.
in Reading, and every single one has culminated in a trip to the playoffs.
Yeah.
That's incredibly rare, especially in minor league hockey where your roster is essentially being dumped upside down, shaken out, and then you've got to pick up the pieces. I think 8 years in a row he had that happen, and he
Right.
put a playoff team on the ice out of it. And especially considering like a Kelly Cup run on top of that too.
Right.
I mean, as far as like a coach goes, it's hard to ask for that model of consistency, and I think that was probably the single biggest like that people will have with Larry is that you knew what you were getting from a Larry Courville coach team, and you were going to be getting a quality product every season.
Not
Right.
only 8 years, Dave, 3 different affiliations in that deal.
That's
Washington,
a nut.
Toronto, and now Philadelphia.
Especially if you have 3 different affiliations. Like that's really impressive. I almost wonder if is there any other coach who has a record like that with that kind of consistency with changes in affiliation.
And there could be some in the ECHL, but I mean, think about this too. How much money have the Royals made off of Larry? I mean, when you think Reading Royals in Reading, Pennsylvania, the first name that comes to your mind is Larry Courville. And I thought from that perspective, that they owed him at least the rest of that
You
year.
also have to think of too, like you just said, how much money they're making him. You wouldn't have all that extra merchandise to flaunt out there for the extra month and a half to 2 months
Right.
or however long you're going to make it for a cup run. And I'm pretty sure, you know, from Royals merchandise standpoint, they didn't do too bad over the summer after they won the cup either.
No, they did not. I'm sure they did not.
I mean, you see a lot of championship gear out there.
Yeah, you do. You do. And people are proud of that in this city. So last year, you know, we had the media pass. We covered games a lot more in depth with the website. Now that we've transitioned in this podcasting, we really haven't had that experience with Larry like we've had in the past. So, you know, myself, Dave, and Ryan were the 3 that would cover games. Devin did most of our marketing work for the site, which was kind of cool. And let's face it, Devin, I don't think was a big writer fan. I think he was more of a promoter to begin with.
Well, not everybody can be a writer.
Yeah. But anyways, so the 3 of us at least got to spend a lot of time interviewing Larry. I'm going to just talk about my favorite moment from the beginning. Anytime he came in after a goalie, you know, would give up 5 or 6 goals and he had to pull them that night, every conversation we had before anything even got said always started off with, "This is off the record," which I thought made my job harder, it made Dave's job harder, and I know it made Ryan's jobs harder. But the reason why I say it was one of my favorite moments is because you got the real Larry that moment, right? I mean, it wasn't a cookie cutter answer that guys like Dave Hackstall will give you or Ron Hextall will give you. He was 100% authentic right from the start, and to me, that was my favorite thing about Larry is you got that authenticity that you look for in a head coach. We can go into your likes, and then we can also talk about our dislikes. So, Dave, do you have any favorite moments that you know you'll remember? And
Like one of the things I remember is that like even like the very first time I was down there, he would like Jason and Marlon would get their questions, and he would turn to me. It's like, "Do you have anything?" It's like even though I'm just some guy down there for a website, he's still treating me just the same and giving me the same amount of respect.
yeah, and he did.
It was awesome to be like given that level of courtesy because I mean, who knows how many people he's had to deal with, and he's not like treating you like you're going to be some nut. He's giving you your shot to do that, and I mean, because I know there were a couple of times where I would ask him questions that were definitely not like some of the softball ones he preferred, but he still would like reach in and give a good answer, and not like lash out, but he would answer it, and like you would get like exactly what you wanted out of it.
Right. Brian, any favorite moments you care to share?
Just that he was honest with us, even after a loss, he would still answer our questions.
Yeah, and I felt a lot of times, Connor Knapp. I mean, we have other nicknames for him, right? But how many games, did we have to go in there? And I think we were more worried about going in to ask him questions, especially after a Connor Knapp game, because you knew right away he was just, he would get 1 or 2 word answers. Me personally, I tried so hard not to laugh half of those times. You'd hear guys like Jason or even Marlon occasionally like, oh, this is going to be a tough night. He's going to be in a bad mood. And then you'd sit there and you'd laugh, right? And he'd go to you and he had that serious look on his face like, come on, let's get this over with because I got more yelling I got to do or more coaching to do. But, I mean, he was awesome for that, right? So let's talk about dislikes. So a lot of people I know on social media always talk about his system, the dump and pass, and the power play constantly drove me nuts, right? I was so happy to see us get rid of Mikey Marcoux because I felt like last year when we brought him back, the power play was doing so much better before he showed up.
Oh, it was night and day. It plummeted pretty much immediately.
Yeah. So for me, the one thing that drove me nuts was the constant power play, and it wasn't the effectiveness. It was who he had out there, specifically guys like Mikey Marcoux. And if you knew Mikey, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Was always 100% authentic, just like Larry was with you. Huge jokester. When I go in there and I'd interview him, half the time he'd sit there and he'd talk about the newest prank he pulled on, whoever the player was. And I thought that was hysterical to sit there and be able to have that kind of connection.
So he was a really beloved guy in the locker room.
Definitely. So, any dislikes for you, Dave, Devin?
I think, I know I'm not going to be alone in this one, too, but it seemed like teams under Courville had a very distinct lack of physicality. I mean, you need physicality in today's game because I know the game's it's moving to be a much quicker, more finesse game, but you still need to have that size and that physicality. Because look at the NHL. I mean, the Blackhawks are a great team, but they just got swept because they're all finesse and no physicality, and they went up against a team that not only has speed and finesse, but they've also got guys with size and physicality. And Chicago had nothing to offer up and retort to it, and they got swept. A number 1 seed got swept by a number 8 seed because they were missing a crucial element to being able to survive.
Yeah, and going back to the Royals, right? Last year, a perfect example of that. We got eliminated in the playoffs. Everybody was yelling and screaming for Derek Mathers. I mean, we clearly needed that physical element last year. And even this year, I mean, we had Tyrell Goulburn. I think I'm saying that name right. Wonderful guy to talk to, wonderful guy to, meet up with and all of that. But at the same time, yeah, he dropped the gloves and he'd do all of that, but I felt that he wasn't there for that purpose.
I mean, the big difference between Goulburn and Mathers is that Goulburn was actually a hockey player, and Mathers is just a fighter on skates.
Exactly.
Because Larry said that constantly last year, who am I going to take out for Mathers? I mean, he doesn't really contribute much offensively or defensively. He just goes out there, hits people, and drops the gloves every game. And especially considering ECHL is only 3 lines. If you have a guy that's constantly fighting, you're constantly going to be that man short.
Right.
Well, whereas with Goulburn, he's got some speed, he's got size, and he's got a pretty nice shot, too, for a physical player like he does.
Ryan, do me a favor while you have your laptop out. Find out, is Derek Mather still playing in Allen?
Okay.
Is he still on? He got cut?
He got cut for the playoffs.
Okay. I was just curious.
I follow his Instagram.
But to me, the big difference with Mathers and Goulburn is that you could stick Goulburn out there and he could contribute in ways other than beating somebody up or hitting somebody. He could actually bring more to the table, whereas with Mathers, you're benching a guy that can help you in tons of other ways.
Right.
For a guy that might go out there and hit someone or fight someone, and then his effectiveness is pretty much nothing the rest of the game. Where Goulburn, you're going to get something every shift from him.
Yeah. So now that Larry's gone, we have a new head coach, at least an interim head coach, and that's Kirk McDonald. Thoughts, first reactions on this coaching staff. Let's not forget who else is there, and we're going to get to him in a minute. That's Ryan Crothers, and we can't go over that subject without telling you guys why we feel the way about Ryan Crothers. So we'll get to that at the end. But first, let's talk about Kirk. Kurt, not Kirk.
Kirk.
Oh, it is Kirk.
Yes.
I'm going to be screwing up this name all the time.
Kirk.
I wrote Kurt. Lucky me. So let's talk about Kirk. I've only ever had 2 interactions with him with two separate interviews, and He to me was exactly like Larry in his answers. But I've noticed the team, and I think a lot of people on social media have noticed, the team seems to be playing with a lot more heart.
A lot more aggression. Too,
a lot
in
more
the right
aggression,
areas.
definitely.
So there's countless times watching the playoff series, how many opportunities they're getting off of an aggressive forecheck.
Yeah.
And that's huge, especially against a well-conditioned team like Brampton.
Yeah.
And creating opportunities in their zone is a good way to make up for that.
And I think right now is an awesome tryout time, is how I'm kind of looking at it with Kirk. I'm not necessarily looking at it for Ryan, because I know Ryan has a connection with his junior team that's in South Carolina, I want to say. Charlotte, so it's North Carolina. My fault.
You were close enough.
Yeah, it's one of the Carolinas. So, I'd be curious to see where Kirk were to take his coaching staff should he be offered the head coaching job next year. And I wouldn't rule out Ryan returning. And I can say the chemistry between the two of them, between Kirk and Ryan, has been, it's clearly visible, right? After a goal scored, Larry would sit there and, he was like a statue, right? Which I guess is how you'd expect your coach to be. Not these two. These two are like they're players again, right? On the bench, they're, high-fiving each other.
They're getting into it.
And honestly,
their guys are fired up.
Yeah. And honestly, if that's what it takes to keep this team motivated, then by all means, do it.
And there's a lot of people that have always said that, even if you look at Mac and you look at Crothers, guys like that there would always be better, like, towards the end of their career, when you could see their play fading, that they'd be better actually behind the bench than they would be on the ice.
Right.
And it's actually showing because, to me, one of the biggest things that I think K-Mac did with this new system and setup that he's running is he let LaBelle back off the leash. Because LaBelle came out there one of the first couple games back, and he just hit everything that freaking moved.
Right.
If you had the puck, you were getting run over, and he was taking it from you. That's just the way he was playing.
Right.
And it's great to see that come back. So I think last night he actually almost drug a Brampton player into the back of the net.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So it's good to see the energy and the chemistry at least starting to come back, which I think is great. And I don't think there's a fan out there that deep down inside doesn't want to see Kirk successful. I think all of us would naturally,
easy way to think of it is like Kirk didn't choose for this to happen.
No, he didn't.
He really wanted to be a head coach, especially for the Royals one day, but I'm sure that he would absolutely would not have wanted it if Larry leaving the way he did is what would have gotten it.
Right. And long term, giving him a tryout the way they are is truly what's best for the Royals. It's a tied series right now, 2-2, right? Game 1 was awesome. It was electric. Game 2 started out that way. Second period, we seemed to lose that chemistry.
Dead.
Third period, it was like a totally new team was out there. But from a coaching standpoint, you didn't see the message change. You saw these guys continue to try and, spark the team and all that other kind of stuff. And it seemed like it wasn't until Game 4 that the team seemed to really be getting its chemistry back on the ice. So something, whether it's Ryan Crothers took the team out drinking, I don't know what it is, but something definitely sparked them this last game. So without further ado, it's the elephant in the room here. We need to talk about Ryan Crothers. And if you guys are a Ryan Crothers fan, I'm going to urge you right now to just leave. There's no sense in really listening to the rest of it. For those of you that are curious, we're going to go into the story as to why our site from day one has not been a Ryan Crothers fan. And it's not to say that we're not rooting for him or the Royals to be successful. It's just we're going to give our public perception, not necessarily perception. We're going to tell the story of what happened when we met Ryan Crothers and why we feel the way we do. So without further ado, let's Devin, this was kind of what happened to you. And I know the people that are no longer part of this organization, right, can't tell us to stop talking about it anymore. So I'm going to go there. So this was 2015? It's the last year Ryan was part of the organization.
Yeah.
So myself, my wife, I didn't have my daughter at the time, which, thank God for that. It would have been a mess. And then Devin and his wife, we decided to attend a Reading Phillies game. And at the game, we noticed there were some Royals players, right? They had just lost to South Carolina. They were, a group of them were just basically sitting together, right? So they weren't very far from us. So we got up, walked over to them, said hello, right? That was really where we wanted to leave it. But
Cracked a few jokes with Fleming, I think it was.
yeah, I mean, I kind of blamed him for the loss, and he laughed, But I'm not going to name any other players' names, but some of the players asked us to sit down and just hang out and enjoy the game with them. So the four of us, we did exactly that. It was a hot out. The game was hot out, right? Players were drinking. Let's make that known. And all of a sudden, a couple more Royals players decided to show up. One of them being Ryan Crothers. At that point, we could tell he had been drinking a few too many, right? And at that point, I remember I was talking to an unnamed player who basically flat out told me, I'm not going to be back here next year because I didn't get along with him, right? And I didn't think anything of it at the time, right? And, there's some other stories that he told me, but for that player's sake of identity, I'm not going to bring any of those up. But a few minutes after he sat down, I got up, I went to the bathroom, right? My wife's grandparent, or I guess it's her grandfather and her brother, own season tickets for the Reading Phillies. I won't call them the Fightins because I don't like that name. That's just me. I'm old school. But so I went up to go use the bathroom, and when I came back, instead of going back to where we were sitting, I went and I sat with, with her grandfather and her brother, right? And we were talking about the Phillies because, it's summer. I'm over hockey at that point, right? So maybe 2 minutes after I was sitting there, all of a sudden my wife comes flying down, and she starts telling me, whatever you do, don't go up there. And I said, go up where? And I turned around, and Ryan Crothers was basically verbally attacking Devin. So, Devin, I don't know if you want to give any more details on that.
Well, put it this way, I know a lot of us fans, we bark at players' social media, or we bark at them when we sit in the stands and, whatever. And I made a couple comments during that playoff run about how Crothers' play was looking. He was trying to force passes, and there was a lot of turnovers going on. And I think I made a comment more than once where I said, hey, he doesn't seem to be producing as much as he used to be on the ice. And that I felt like he would do a better job behind the bench and not on the ice. Like he was doing more harm out there
right.
for the team's own good at the point.
And you probably got that mindset from me. So I'll give you a little bit of background on me. That was my first year as a season ticket holder. Before then, I was, I wanted nothing to do with basically minor league hockey until I saw the price of season tickets. That's really what got me interested to start with. But for me, minor league sports has always been a place where I wanted to see guys develop, and then I wanted to see them get to the next level, and then eventually at the pro level. For me to see a guy in his 30s playing at what I consider the AA version of hockey, right? I'd get angry seeing him out on the ice versus a younger player that I thought needed the ice experience to be able to get to that next level. So I know, me personally, I was always very critical, career minus 57. I'm going to keep saying it, right? Was it minus 54, minus 57? It's definitely in the 50s.
It's somewhere around there.
But to
it's
me,
definitely way too high of a negative number.
It is. And it's not to say he was a bad player. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about using that roster spot, right? And taking away another younger guy's development. And I get it, it's a competitive sport. I get it, these guys need paychecks. I get it, they still have the drive to play. But when you're in your mid-30s, I don't see you getting to the NHL. And if that's not your goal, then what are you doing in the league?
I mean, my whole thing is, I don't mind having one or two of those guys on the roster because you sometimes need them there to get the kids to snap
right.
out of their out of their funk. But
like any team needs veteran leaders.
Exactly.
Right.
But my whole point was,
he was getting top line minutes. Let's not forget.
Yeah.
He was getting top line minutes.
My whole point was, at that point in time in his career, I felt like at that point in time he should have been trying to transition more into
a coaching
role.
Yep.
Maybe spending less minutes on the ice and helping the guys out a little bit more. I don't care for all that. Hey, he was a captain before. He did a great job as a captain before. But all I was saying was that year that it just looked like you could tell his game was progressing more further away from the actual play of the game and more towards worrying about whatever the whole situation as a whole.
Right.
So me, doing that, I think, in mostly frustration over the playoffs, I may or may not have said some things on social media that I shouldn't have said, but the fact of the matter is that me and him...
But let's be clear, at that game, he approached you about those things, and you apologized.
I did. I actually offered to buy him a beer.
Yeah, and it was, from what I understand, it was at that point that he continued to be very ignorant over, the subject. Yeah, let's be honest, he was clearly drunk, right? And so for me, having him back in town, I want to see him successful. I get it, he's with younger players now. I want to see him continue to coach. And at this point in his career, I would expect him to have at least gotten past that. But what drove me nuts about the whole situation, and the guy that we approached in the organization is no longer here. That's how I'm going to say it about this subject. But he couldn't get him to apologize to you. And for me, to have a player acknowledge that, yeah, that situation happened, yes, I did that, and he tells a guy that's no longer in the organization that that happened, to tell you that I'm not going to apologize for what I say is complete bullshit. And for me, even if I saw the guy in public today, I'd still have the same mindset. I'd want to kick his ass for that. And I know that's why my wife stopped me the minute she heard, what was going on up there. And, so for me, it's tough if he's back next year. I don't know if I'll renew. I'll be there with the tickets, but where I live, I can go drive the same distance to see the Royals as I can the Phantoms. At that point, what's the point? The money's not the option or the problem. It's, what do I want to see best, right? For me, I always got the better value with the Reading Royals. It was a family place. You get the commercialism with the Phantoms, right? And that's just reality. But to have him back would ultimately drive me nuts. I would see how next year would go. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I would know that, hey, this guy's here. It wouldn't affect how I would cheer for the team. It wouldn't affect how I'm rooting for the players. But in my mind, I can't get as excited as I used to get knowing that he's there. And for me, I don't know, the playoff run kind of seems the same. Kind of like the same thing, but at the same time, I'm more excited to see how Kirk does, right?
Exactly. There's that point, and another point that I'm going to push out there is, I don't know if maybe his being here is kind of like a deal where it was like, K-Mac was, hey, I need assistant coach, I need help here, and your season's over, do you want to come up and help me quick type deal, or if he's going to be coming back next year, because I know if Ryan can check into this, I think he owns part of that junior team that...
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. Honestly, I think Kirk reaching out to Ryan to come in as the assistant coach for the playoffs, that was a brilliant move. Because, objectively speaking, Ryan's a guy who's familiar with the organization. He knows a lot of the players. He gets along well with a lot of them. They clearly respect him. And to bring him in, a guy that's... he coached the team to the championship. He's clearly got a good hockey mind.
Yeah.
To tap a guy like that to come in and help out for a playoff run, brilliant.
Yeah, and I know I'm not alone in my feelings towards Ryan being back. I know there's part of the
out there besides our group of guys here. There's I don't know how much of that is accurate, but there was stuff I guess that happened with the old Junior Royals organization that.
Yeah, but none of us were around for any of that kind of stuff.
So I can't speculate on that, but there's other people out there that don't like him. But like I said, like Dave just said, he has that experience. He's has his knowledge of hockey, and like I always said before, I think he would have been a better asset behind the bench. And now that he's behind the bench, let's see if he can prove me right, and let's see how far he can help push this team along.
Well, and
that's the way I'm looking at it at this point.
I look at it a little bit different, right? So I look at the fan base, right? When I'm looking at Ryan Crothers, there's two different types of fans. There's Ryan Crothers fans, and then there's Yannick Tifu fans, right? If you're a Tifu fan, you want nothing to do with Ryan Crothers, and that's just the perception I've had. But for me personally, at this stage, right, if I'm naming a head coach and I'm not considering Kirk next year, and I have to choose between Yannick or Ryan Crothers, as much as me at a personal level wouldn't want to see this, I'd hire Ryan, only because he's had more coaching experience at this point, and from what I've gathered, he's had some success in North Carolina, and I would expect him at this point, now that he's been coaching for a couple more years, not only does he have the experience, but he should also have the Rolodex going, right? He should start knowing who the contacts are, who he needs to start talking to in the league. So,
It's like Yannick is a pretty clean slate.
Yeah, and if he does, And then there's other. Let's talk about this, right? So there's other blog sites out there that I think are hysterically inaccurate. I'm not going to name any names because I'm not going to give them any credit, and we all know how we feel about some of these people. But the day after he gets put on the wall or the plaque or whatever you want to call it, this site goes out there and just announces, hey, he's going to be our next head coach, blah, 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 and just pisses off a bunch of fans. I mean, that's all that guy wanted
Not
to
to
do.
mention the organization. The organization was furious over
Yeah,
that.
and all that was clickbait. That's all that's all that was for that particular individual, from in the way that I look at it. But
And
so
we made sure to inform the public that we would only be reporting real news.
yeah, but we also know that Ryan Crothers and that site seem to have a connection. So it's not to say that site is totally inaccurate. It is a good site to constantly follow to see where that kind of nuggets and news comes out. But for me personally, I felt like that was just a clickbait type of scheme.
It was blatant.
Yeah. So, all right. So without further ado, we're going to end episode 3. Game 5 is tomorrow.
Yep.
Saturday
8:30.
in Brampton. So let's
Or
see how
later.
let's see how the team does. But hey, at least we got another home game Monday, right?
Yeah,
Monday.
hopefully.
So I would expect the team to come back a little bit tired, but I would expect both teams to be tired, right? That's the beauty of the playoffs. So
Well, yeah, it's not going to be an excuse because every team's going to be tired.
exactly.
It's a
So
level playing field.
without further ado, from Penn to Broad is signing off.